Storm and Shadows. Home invasion. Nothing will ever be the same. It was a quiet evening in the suburb of Woodridge. Rain drizzled softly, creating a gentle patter against the windows of the Archer house. Inside, the couple was gathered in the living room, unaware of the impending storm that was about to change their lives forever. Erica Archer, a skilled nurse, was reading a book on the sofa, while her husband Daniel, a software engineer, was reading one of his engineering books. As the night wore on, the weather grew worse, turning into a massive storm. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the dark sky. Thunder echoed in the distance shortly after. Erica glanced up from her book, feeling a sense of unease. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. "Did you lock the doors?" she asked, her voice laced with concern as she glanced around. Daniel looked up from his book, slightly irritated by her interruption. "Yes, Erica, everything's locked up tight. There's no reason to worry." Erica couldn't help it, though. She stood up, her muscles tight as she walked to the front door, checking the lock herself. Satisfied that it was secure, she took off her outer shirt, hoping to get more comfortable. Returning to the living room, she tried to force herself to focus on her book, but her mind didn't want to cooperate and kept wandering. Outside, 3 figures were lurking in the shadows of the Archer home. Known to the police as the Shadows, this trio of thieves had made a name for themselves among the police and the crime buffs with their daring heists and their uncanny ability to avoid being captured. Tonight they were on the run after a very successful but risky robbery at a high-end jewelry store in the area nearby. Damon, their leader, was a cunning and ruthless man with a talent for planning and executing intricate heists. His 2 accomplices, Blaine and Axe, were equally skilled in locks and security systems and loyal to a fault. The trio had been dodging police for hours, and the storm had provided them with the perfect cover to find a temporary hideout. Damon motioned for his partners to follow him as he approached the back of the Archer house, staying out of sight. "This place looks perfect. We'll lay low here until the heat dies down," he whispered. Blaine nodded, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. "Let's do this quickly and quietly. We don't want any trouble." Axe, the most unstable of the group, grinned mischievously. "Trouble's my middle name, though, and I want to have some fun." Damon shot him a stern look. "No jokes, Axe. We need to be smart about this." With that, the trio moved silently toward the back porch. Damon picked the lock on the back door with practiced ease, and they slipped silently inside, closing the door softly behind them. They pulled on dark face masks to conceal their identities. Damon was ruthless, but he didn't want to become wanted for murder if he could prevent it. Inside, Erica had finally managed to relax a little. The sound of the rain and thunder was almost soothing, and she was beginning to thankfully get lost in the pages of her novel. Daniel was still engrossed in his studying, and the house was quiet. It seemed like a typical stormy night. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Erica's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a surge of panic. "Daniel, are you okay?" Daniel sighed and stood up, reaching for his phone to use as a flashlight. "Yes, I am fine. Why are you so jumpy this evening? I'm going to go and check the fuse box." Before he could move, they heard a noise in the hallway. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, with a slight squeak of wet shoes. Erica's blood ran cold, and she grabbed Daniel's arm. "Did you hear that? We aren't alone," she whispered. Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see him, his face pale. "Stay here. I'll check it out." As he moved cautiously toward the hallway, Erica grabbed her phone and brought up her keypad to dial 911. Daniel's phone light cut through the darkness. As he rounded the corner seconds later, he came face to face with Damon, who pointed a gun at him. Daniel froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "Don't make a sound," Damon hissed, as he directed Daniel backward into the living room. "Give me your phones, now." Not having the chance to finish the call, Erica sighed in defeat and reluctantly handed it over. Within minutes, Erica and Daniel were huddled together on the sofa with their backs to the window. Damon kept his gun trained on Daniel, while Blaine and Axe went to secure the rest of the room as well as the whole house, making sure there were no hidden surprises. Erica clutched Daniel's arm tightly, trying to keep him calm and still, while Daniel stared wide-eyed at the intruders, his mind volleying between fear and intense anger. "Who are you and what do you want?" Daniel demanded, sounding much braver than he felt inside. Damon stepped forward, his expression cold and calculating. "We're not here to hurt you. We just need a place to lay low for a while. Cooperate, and we'll be gone by morning, and you'll both stay alive." Blaine entered the room. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "You got a nice place here. Shame if something were to happen to it." Axe laughed as he joined them and nodded in agreement, twirling his knife through his fingers. "Yeah, A real shame. Erica's eyes filled with tears. Please, just let us go. We won't tell anyone. Damon shook his head. I'm afraid we can't do that. But like I said, if you cooperate, no one gets hurt. Daniel clenched his fists, feeling helpless. He felt the need to protect his wife, but he also knew that any attempt to fight back at the moment would put them in even more danger. Deciding to wait, he sat and bided his time, praying for an opportunity for them to escape this nightmare. As the storm intensified and raged outside, the hours dragged on. The shadows took turns keeping watch, their eyes never leaving the archers, never giving them an inch of room to even think about attempting anything. Every sound seemed louder in the forced silence, and the tension in the room was thick. Daniel was exhausted. He'd been up since early morning for a meeting on a new contract. The house was filled only with the heavy breathing of their guests and quiet mumbling when they would talk to each other, highlighted only by the sound of the pouring rain and crashes of thunder. Damon pulled Erica off the sofa to stand in front of him. We need food and water. You're going to get it ready. Slowly and silently, she led him into the kitchen, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe she could find a way to alert someone, to get help. But Damon was always one step ahead, his grip on the gun never wavering. Don't try anything stupid, Damon warned, eyeing her. We've been doing this for quite a while. Don't make me hurt you. She nodded, feeling the weight of the gun pressed against her back. He opened the fridge for her, and she began gathering supplies, trying to think of a way out of this situation. As she started placing the food into the bag, she had an idea. Some of the fruit was next to something they had bought to use for their vacation next month. Discreetly, Erica grabbed one of them with the same hand that she picked up an apple with and slipped it into the bag she was holding. Damon didn't appear to notice, having her leave the bag of food on the kitchen island to pick up for when they would leave. She could only hope it was soon. As the night wore on, Daniel's mind raced with possibilities. He knew that waiting for the police to find them was getting riskier as the night wore on. He felt like he had to take matters into his own hands. Blaine and Axe were bantering, but it was starting to become heated about who should get what from their spoils. While Damon was distracted for a second, Daniel put his head down and whispered to Erica, "Need to get away. When you can, run." Erica's eyes widened in fear, but she squeezed his hand to show she heard and understood. Damon was watching them again. She knew that their only chance of survival was to act and do it soon. Daniel waited for the right moment. When Damon and Axe were in the kitchen finding something to snack on, he lunged at Blaine, catching him off guard. The two men struggled, and Daniel managed to knock the gun out of Blaine's hand, and it skidded across the floor. "Run!" Daniel hissed. Erica sprinted toward the front door. Before she could reach it, Blaine punched Daniel, who fell to the ground. In the struggle, Blaine picked up the gun and pointed it at Erica, causing him to call out in fear, "Go, Erica!" While she was trying to open the deadbolt to make her escape, he squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the house. "Daniel!" she cried out as she clutched her shoulder and fell to the floor in the entryway, so close to escape but so far away. Damon suddenly appeared, his face contorted with rage. "You shouldn't have done that," he snarled, aiming his gun at Daniel, who was now being subdued by Axe. Erica's breathing stopped momentarily, waiting on what would happen next. Their escape attempt was a bust, and they were worse off than before. Damon grabbed her roughly by her uninjured arm and pulled her back into the living room, throwing her onto the couch, ignoring the blood beginning to stain the shoulder of her shirt. She clutched at the spot to try to slow the bleeding, using her own shirt as a gauze. "You may or may not live to regret that," Damon said, his voice dripping with menace. Daniel was pleased to see Erica fill the room as he craned his neck to catch a glimpse of his wife. Blaine held his arm tightly behind his back and his face against the wall of the hallway. Axe covered them with the gun while Damon began to pace back and forth, wondering how they'd gotten into this mess and how in the world were they going to get out of it. Sounds of sirens began in the distance. The trio didn't know if they were found out or not. If the police had been alerted to the sound of gunfire, they could be closing in on the area as they delayed. Damon's expression darkened as he realized their time was running out. "We need to move," he said to Blaine and Axe, "but we can't leave any witnesses. Guys, take care of it." Erica's heart sank as he quickly headed toward the kitchen. Knowing what was to come, she closed her eyes, praying for a miracle. She had her answer before she could even open her eyes again. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house as the front door burst open, pieces of wood flying everywhere. A team of SWAT officers stormed into the house, their guns trained on the two shadows in the front room and hall. "Drop your weapons," the lead officer shouted. Blaine and Axe were caught off guard, their plans splintering into a million shards before their eyes. Realization of their situation on their faces, they reluctantly relaxed their hands, dropping their guns, and raised their arms slowly in surrender. It was the only option left for the two men. Damon, taking advantage of an opportunity to slip out the door her as the team headed to clear the upstairs, grabbed the bag with the food and the stolen jewels, making a break for it. Officers quickly secured the scene, handcuffing Blaine and Axe and leading them outside. While Erica was attended to by the paramedics, Daniel was escorted to the safety of their SWAT van that was parked outside, their ordeal finally over. Paramedics brought Erica out of the house on a stretcher to be lifted up into the ambulance to be taken to the hospital. Thankfully, there was a break in the storm, and the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. Daniel stood outside their home wrapped in a blanket provided by the paramedics. He watched as Blaine and Axe were taken away, their reign of terror brought to an end. But Damon was still out there. He closed his eyes, trying not to show the anger that filled them. "Don't worry," one of the officers said, reassuring them. "We'll find him." Daniel nodded, sighing. As Erica was being lifted into the ambulance, she remembered what she had done in the kitchen earlier. "Oh, I just remembered," she called out, and the officer walked over to her. "I put an air tag in one of the bags that he took. You can track him." Wincing, she handed over her phone after bringing up the tracking program, a satisfied smirk lifting the corner of her mouth. The officer's eyes widened in surprise. "That's ingenious. You're absolutely brilliant. We'll get on it right away. Thank you." Taking her phone, he went to his supervisor, and within moments, about half of the police cars and SWAT van left, squealing their tires. "Looks like you guys know how to clear an area," said one of the remaining officers. "How about you ride to the hospital with your wife, and I give you a police escort for all the help. We'll leave an officer posted here to make sure nothing else happens." "That sounds wonderful," Erica sighed, laying her head back on the sterile-smelling pillow as they raised her into the ambulance and clanged the doors shut. In short time, the police tracked down Damon to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Due to Erica's quick thinking, Damon found himself surrounded, his escape route cut off by the advancing SWAT team. He knew he was trapped, but refused to surrender easily. Gripping the bag containing the stolen jewels and supplies, he retreated only to find himself against a solid inner wall, his mind racing for a way out. "Drop the bag and put your hands up," the lead officer commanded, his voice letting him know there was no way he was going to make an escape again. Damon hesitated for a long moment, weighing his options. He glanced around frantically, searching for any possible escape route, but the warehouse was deserted and completely empty, with no hiding spots or exits he could use. Realizing the futility of his situation, Damon slowly lowered the bag to the ground and raised his hands, signaling his surrender. Officers moved in quickly, restraining him and checking him for any other weapons. "You're under arrest for robbery, assault, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder," the lead officer stated, reading Damon his rights as they placed handcuffs on him with a loud click. Damon remained silent, his face a mask of defiance and anger. He had no idea how he had been outsmarted. His plan, which had seemed foolproof just hours ago, had crumbled before his eyes. "Oh, and if you're wondering how we caught you," said one of the officers holding him, "it's all credited to one extremely brave, intelligent woman and one tiny little air tag." Damon's scream was one born of hatred and frustration. His shoulders slumped, beaten and finally accepting his fate. Meanwhile, back at the local hospital, Erica and Daniel sat in the private emergency exam room, relieved but exhausted. Doctors and nurses tended to Erica's wound, assuring them that it was non-lethal, but she was going to have to go in for surgery to remove the bullet. "I'm so sorry, Erica," his voice filled with guilt. "I never should have put us in that situation." Erica squeezed his hand gently, offering a reassuring smile despite being exhausted, her pain meds finally starting to take effect. "You did what you felt you had to do to protect us. We're alive, and that's all that matters." They watched footage on the small television in the room showing the police loading Blaine and Axe into separate vehicles, their faces angry yet defeated. Officers came and took statements from Erica and Daniel in the following days, thanking and praising them for their bravery and cooperation. New information was about to arrive, though, that would change their lives forever. A long week later, the Archers were able to return to their home to rebuild their lives. Despite the damage and memories of fear, they felt a sense of relief and closure knowing the Shadow's reign of thefts had ended. They learned that the thoughtful neighbors had noticed something wrong and had alerted the police to their situation. In the weeks that followed, Damon, Blaine, and Axe were prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and the stolen jewels were recovered and returned to their rightful owners. If you're wondering about Damon, his days of freedom were over. The authorities uncovered even more of his criminal activities, and his sentence made sure he was not going to see the light of day until he was too old to enjoy it. Erica and Daniel found out that they were going to be parents when Erica had been in the hospital after being hurt. The littlest Archer was healthy and brought joy when the path could have easily turned dark. Friends, neighbors, and the community rallied around them when they finally came home from the hospital hospital the second time 9 months later for a much happier reason. Rain Archer was welcomed into the loving arms of her parents and their close-knit neighbors and friends. Thanks for listening, and please take a moment to support the channel by liking and subscribing to hear more stories like this. Check out this one next.